Hey, fellow Gianteers, those of us like our spirituality with a twist. As you can see, we have the pleasure today of being joined by a very special guest, Sameet Kumar. Hey, Sameet. Sameet is a clinical psychologist specializing in end-of-life care, focused on helping patients through the dying process. Sameet is also just a fascinating person, a Tibetan Buddhist. We actually first met, the three of us, at a Buddhist retreat at the Theosophical Society right here in our neck of the woods, right? And but then specifically with an interest in psychedelic research as well. So we wanted to talk about, first of all, Sameet's research, or sorry, Sameet's work overall, a little bit about that, and then specifically about research projects, because we're always interested in like all of this spiritually connected stuff. And Sameet's doing really profound things. So thanks so much for coming on, Sameet.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe the first thing to do is we just ask you a little bit about maybe a general description of your work before we get into really talking about this specific focus within the research that we want to talk about as well. So I'll throw the mic over to you and you can just share whatever, you want to share about that.
sure. Let's see. I've been for more than 25 years now. I've specialized in the psychological care of people going through cancer treatment. And for a big chunk of that practice that I do is focused on people who are facing really very limited time on earth because of their illness. And also assisting who were caregivers and are now the bereaved for people who've gone through cancer treatment. I've written books about grief and anxiety and things like that that are informed from my practice. So really where I've come in, where I really focused on for the past 25, 26 years is the care for people with severe medical issues and the challenges that that brings.
I didn't like ask you about this, but I know you're an author on this subject too. So maybe we should just have you maybe share the titles of your books as well, right?
Oh, sure.
For people who might be interested.
Sure. Many years ago, I wrote Grieving Mindfully and then The Mindful Path Through Worry and Rumination. Um, there's the Mindfulness for Prolonged Grief workbook. And recently, my publisher put a compendium, sort of a collection of grief writings from various authors. Um, um, it's called I kind of forgot the title right now because I didn't work on it too much. How to Grieve What We've Lost.
Oh, okay. All right.
And that's a very practical sort of bullet point collection of not literal bullet points, but like very short chapters. Because one thing that happens, and this is sort of a general theme, right? One thing that happens when humans are faced with challenges, no matter what the cause is, a stress response takes over. And when our stress response takes over, our attention span tends to evaporate. And
Yeah.
we become pretty fixated on emotional states that might not be very wholesome, healthy, conducive to growth mindsets, growth oriented mindsets. And we oftentimes just wind up spiraling down instead of spiraling up. And, just trying to keep our head above water becomes a big challenge. So that's really what my work has focused on is navigating very turbulent waters in people's lives, helping them get some air, along the way. And also at the very end to make sure that this is something that I learned since the last time we talked. I took care of my dad at home in his really his final years, but during his dying process. And this is something he taught me as a scientist that he was facing death head on was sometimes the most important thing we can do is what we don't do, right? Meaning he really didn't want to die within a hospital system. He wanted to go peacefully at home. And sometimes I think a big part of what I'm doing is advocating for patients to have dignity on their own terms, not how the medical system or culture or society defines it, but what does it mean to you to be dignified at the end, right?
Condolences on the passing of your dad. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
was just thinking about that, as you were talking before you even talked about your dad, I might flash back to my own dad's passing, which was a long time ago, 2007. But,
Wow.
what really struck me about what you were talking about, we're all meditative people, right? We have kind of a meditative podcast here. And that was one of the things that was like, helpful for me in that moment because what you're talking about, the overwhelm of all of it. And I can
Yeah,
remember like doing the hospice work and sitting with my dad and like kind of taking his hand and just like doing my practice, doing my meditative
yeah,
thing, you know,
yeah,
and you can feel the effect on yourself. And, you know, we're all, again, meditative folks. So you can feel your connection with the spirit of that loved one too, right? In those moments. I think
yeah.
that felt very real for me.
It's
So,
attunement. It's attunement,
yeah.
right? This idea that we can entrain, we can kind of synchronize our rhythms, right, with the people around us. And so what I found, I never went to graduate school thinking, I'm going to be a psychologist that specializes in, seeing people dying and going through catastrophic medical conditions. Like that sounds so cool to me. Like that was not me. I decided to kind of dip my toe in the water with that in a practicum, a training year in a cancer center, because it seemed like, I was always interested in spirituality, existential issues. And I thought, why don't I do this for a year? Definitely not something I want to do long term,
Yeah.
right? Because, well, it's kind of weird. And what I found and what was validated by my supervisors was that I had that meditation practice going already back then, right? And people were opening up and talking about things with me as like a second year pipsqueak, right?
Yeah.
In training, they were just like very comfortable and they were opening up in ways that, my supervisor was like, have you thought about maybe doing this for a living? Because people really respond to you. Like when you're at the bedside, they feel at ease. What are you doing? And I was like, well, I meditate a lot. Um, Maybe that's what it is. And I think that is what it is. It's that attunement that when people see a stable base, they feel safe,
Yes.
right? Yeah. And they're in a very dangerous spot existentially and oftentimes medically. And even if that feeling of safety is 30 seconds or a couple minutes or 10 minutes, right? Like that can be pretty profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Sameet, let
like,
me ask
oh,
you,
it's good. Yeah.
your, and you work with a lot of end stage people, but do you find that also like the grieving process can be equal in intensity in the loss of, Eric and I talk a lot about relationships, right? In just like, friend groups moving apart, lovers breaking apart, or sometimes even workplace situations breaking apart. And what
Oh
are
yeah.
what is your, or do you have experience, kind of guiding people through those things, and how does it differ from end of life kind of stuff, if at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some kind of commonalities, universalities, and there's no like blood test to measure grief
Right.
responses, right? So some people you're just like, wow, are you okay? Like, how can you be quote unquote okay? It doesn't seem to affect them, and other people are absolutely devastated. And it kind of doesn't matter sometimes. I mean, it does, but it also doesn't. I think loss is just such a big umbrella. And this is, what the Buddha taught, right? Like suffering is just, it's part of the price of admission. Like you're not
Right.
going to get through life without that in some way. And the suffering of change, the suffering of loss is a universal, right? Like every exhalation is a loss in some way. And you can scale that up to the end of a marriage, the end of a developmental stage, right? Like how many of us were, so eager to go into adulthood, right? Like can't wait to not be a kid again, right? Like when you're,
Yeah.
maybe that happened at some point, but right, like these developmental stages, right, is I'm getting into old age now, and it's kind of daunting, right? Like, oh, what body system's going to collapse first, right? And
Yeah.
but the loss of a relationship, divorce, addiction, there's so many different ways to experience it. Immigration is a loss too, right? And that's something that we as a society are wrestling with now, as a culture in the United States are wrestling with now. But there's, we're in a time of great upheaval, and there's individual grief and there's also collective grief,
Right.
right? The losses that have happened to communities and cultures and ways of life and predictability. And we humans crave stability is something that working with dying people has taught me, is that we really value stability over almost everything else. Most people think they want to be happy, but I think deep down inside, when you watch how people behave, it's really stability that's running the show, right?
Right.
Why'd you do that again? That's what I know, right?
Weird question on that, because this is something Daniel and I have been talking a lot too. When you think of stability, what do you think is that balance point? This is a little of a tangent, but it's a fascination point between like yin yang people, because we're a little bit Taoist on this podcast too. You need movement and dynamism, you need stability. You kind of need both almost, right?
Yeah.
And there is like a lot of craving for stability. And you could even argue, you're bringing up what's happening maybe in the world right now, that a lot of this stuff that's happening is driven by some kind of fear, right? And then human beings under fear, it's a potentially dangerous emotion, right? And so there's something about stability and fear, right? That is it driven by
Yes.
kind of a natural need for stability that we all need. We all need yin and nourishing and stability in order to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Or how much of this is like built in like fear? I don't know. Since you brought it up, I thought I would just throw it out to you, get your thoughts,
Well,
because it's such an important thing going on right now, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what's the the oldest possible estimate on civilization as we think of it? Maybe 10,000 years, more than likely 5 to 7,000 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But we as a species have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And our brains, our bodies, I believe, are adapted to a hunter-gatherer communal lifestyle.
Right.
And this modern life is really not quite, we haven't quite caught up to it, right? So in a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, what do you need? You need predictable food, shelter, right? What we consider basics, right? And predictable seasons, predictable terrain. You don't want to be in a place where predator's going to jump out at you at any minute, right? You want to be able to know what's in the environment. And I think that kind of neural pathway is still what we work with, right? Predictability and stability is what we want, right? Like nobody wants an unstable economy. No, no, no. We have to
Right.
stabilize.
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I going to plan for retirement in 30 years, right? It's the same thing as like, how am I going to feed my family tonight? It's the same neural pathway, right? And I don't think
Yeah.
hunter gatherers were thinking about retirement. Right?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Much more like in the heat of the moment, right? For your hunter gatherer. Yeah. But
Right.
we have those like
Right.
that projection into the future. I guess it's kind
Yeah.
of like part of your psychology too, that's kind of existential then too, because it opens up that whole thing of like awareness of all these future potential threats, right? Which create these existential anxieties on some level,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my
Well,
AirPods just croaked. Any? Is that
No,
okay
you're
on the
good.
microphone?
yeah, you still
Okay.
Yeah.
sound good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was
Okay.
gonna say, Sameet, you're looking good. I don't know how old you are. You don't know how old I am. I'm in my mid
I-
50s. So when you started bringing up like the aging of the body, I was like, yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
I'm starting to think
54.
about that.
I'm getting
Yeah,
in there too.
I'm
Yep.
56.
Yeah. Yeah. My
So
run
as
time's a
I,
little slower than it was. Yeah.
yeah,
Taking me a little bit longer to recover from my workouts than it used to. But
yeah, I'm like a
yes.
little bit worried about the chunkiness factor. That's like a little,
Yeah.
think about that, the
Yeah.
uncontrollable chunkiness.
Yep. Yep. I read one of the things I did early on, Lama Glenn Mullen, who was running the retreat that we all met at many years ago, he translated a collection called Death and Dying, the Tibetan Tradition. And in it, he has a translation of a poem called Conversation with an Old Man, where it's a young man who sees like an old beggar who's all disfigured with old age. And and the old man starts to talk to the young man. They're talking to each other. And he says, the Lord of Death has spit on my head. That's where my hair is turned white. And it's like, oh, my white beard. It's the Lord of Death that spit on me. Right.
Yes.
I think I
Yeah.
have that book on the shelf out over there, but I think I just skipped that chapter. Didn't
Yeah.
want to read that one yet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I guess before we move on to the study itself, maybe we can hook it up to some of our practice too, because what struck me earlier of what you were saying is I got into this through Zen. Daniel came in through his route. You came in through your routes. Eventually, all end up in this Tibetan Buddhist world, at least in part.
Mhm.
But we're within these practices that really directly face these fears, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, they don't shy around these issues. And in so many ways, I guess you could say that a lot of times in our culture in the States, we don't have as much of that thought of like, well, let's look at this very frankly and honestly and come to some kind of terms with it. So I was just maybe that's worthwhile kind of chatting too if you have things you want to share about that, because it is a powerful part of what we're up to, right? And I imagine it informs your work.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've really come to appreciate is how recent it is that people don't die at home routinely.
Right.
Like, this is a post World War II phenomenon of, embalming. Embalming is something that happened after the Civil War. It was invented during the Civil War. And most people died at home until the 50s, until the 1950s. So we've had several generations now where it's just something that's done over there, right? And no, don't bring the children. It's going to be too disturbing or something like that. When Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about growing up in a village in Switzerland in the 30s, and guy in her village died, and they laid out his body on the kitchen table in his house, and everybody came by and paid their respects as a village, as a community. And I think that's just how it's been done around the world for millennia. And now it's just so sanitized, and we come to these other places, right? Like we think about India, Tibet, and sky burial and things like that, where we're just so it's so different from what we have in this country, in this culture. And I think part of us craves it, right? Because we're like, surely it can't be about how many likes I got on my last post, right? It can't be
Wait,
how many
what?
followers I have, right?
Are you
Like there's
sure?
got to be something else, because every time I look and I check, I'm happy for like a millisecond, and then I want more, and then I want more.
Yeah.
Like it's never enough, right? And so this is a new experiment of sequestering death away into hospital systems. It's always been done at home with families, right? We 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 exist in relation. We used to die in relation, right?
Yeah.
And now it's just so fragmented. And I think part of us craves that connection again.
Yeah, I don't want to like go off on a tangent about my own experience with it, but and my dad, we did do hospice at home. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some Chinese medicine things, acupuncture, that they have, if you get to the spirituality of it, to help the body and the spirit go through that process, right? Which I'm sure we'll be
Yeah,
talking about as we go forward.
sure,
And
sure.
one of the things that was shocking was that the minute my dad passed, it was like, okay, and there was a production that was supposed to start. Okay, we're going to take his body and we're going to put it away and he's going to go in the bag. And I was like, time out, let's
Yeah,
spend
hold
some
on.
time, hold on,
Yeah,
for our sake as like the family members who may need some time to process this, but also, we'll talk about, I imagine like Tibetan things too as we go forward, but to give
yeah,
that spirit of that person and that system of that person, if you want to think that way, time to go through that process. So I was like
yeah,
fending off people. So yeah,
yeah.
it really struck me what you were saying, how true that is. There's like a production process almost or something, right?
Well,
That
this
can
is the
potentially
thing is
just kick
that,
in.
hmm?
That can potentially just kick in the gear, right? You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, this is the thing is that we all live in this kind of environment where all of these things are commodified, right? Like there's an industry behind bodies, there's an industry behind health and
Right.
wellness, there's industries. And, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like somebody dies, well, let's clear it out and move this thing along.
Yeah.
And we forget that, dying is sacred, death is sacred, life is sacred, illness, well, that's also sacred, right? It kind of sucks, but that doesn't mean it's not sacred, right? And I think taking that time out and pausing and taking that step back, right? And and this is what I think so much of the Dharma practices do, is cultivate awareness all times of day, all settings, all circumstances, right? This is something that is a real struggle. Like, can you perceive what's happening around you as part of the sacred mandala, right? Especially when you don't like it, right? Because that's really what the challenge is. Can you perceive words as mantra that really are jarring to you, spoken by somebody you can't stand, right?
Uh,
Like, that's a stretch. That's a stretch, but that's what these practices challenge us to do, right?
Yeah, I really
Speaking of
feel.
that,
Oh, go ahead.
Sameet, there
Sorry.
was I took a class last year. It was like a death and dying acupuncture series. And in the first meeting, someone was like, "Well, what can I do? You know, like if I'm with a family member or somewhere where this is happening, a retirement home, you know, someplace." And I just thought it was very practical. Someone goes, "Start by turning the TV off."
Yes.
You know, and you're talking
Yes.
about like hearing
Great.
sounds and stuff like they're
Yeah.
like, just turn the TV off. You don't have to say anything or do anything. You just hold their hand and stay there, and that's it.
Yeah.
But like, who wants to be at that point in your existence with, you know, CNN or Fox or, you know,
Yeah.
baseball playing in the background,
Right.
people cheering or
Right.
yelling or what, like it's just, you know, so
Right.
even like the observation of that moment. Even the fact that someone had to make it the point to say that to people means that she's been in places where that wasn't the case. And I just, you know, you work in a hospital. Eric works in a hospital. I know what a hospital is. You know, they got the TVs in every room, right?
Yep.
Always on, no matter, you know, kind of like very few times do I go, is it off? Usually it's on and people are zoning out, trying to pass the time to heal and go home, right? But in that moment, it's like, honor the time that's there. The process, like you were saying, is has been commodified and is going to happen. But how much time can we steal back for ourselves
Yeah.
to honor the thing that's only going to happen once?
Yeah. 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 That is so well put. Yes. Yes. You don't get to do this again, right?
No.
Like, do you want to have like a strange TV channel with a sports team that your loved one was not a fan of, like winning?
Right, right. I
Right?
forget.
Like, oh,
He hated the Bengals. What?
right, 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 right.
Yeah,
And I see it all the time, right? Like the TVs are on because there's a lot of time to kill, you know,
right.
what a way to put it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember having my appendix out as a teenager and being in the hospital, and they were blasting this like insipid music everywhere. And I remember thinking, this is like a nightmare. You know,
Yeah.
being some sick
Yeah.
person, and it's just all this drivelly I mean, I guess if it was something good, but it was just like music-y kind of stuff just flittering
Yes.
everywhere. And like it was
Right.
Muzak.
yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Right. Yeah.
All right. Should we move on to the next piece, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we'll throw it open to you, Sameet, right? We have a really good feeling of like what you're doing. So I guess the question would be like you got involved in some ways in this research. And I thought maybe we'd ask you to share a little bit of the study you were involved with, and then we'll kick around what we think it means. So if you don't mind sharing about that, I think that would be
Oh,
fascinating
sure,
for everybody,
sure.
including me.
So you know, there. Let me start with a very brief or broad overview of psychedelic therapy research in the last 20 years has really been very individual based, right? And it's test subject or clinical trial subject comes into a study. They're given a bunch of questionnaires. They work with a team of therapists, and then they have like preparatory sessions with the therapists. And then they come in and they're on a couch or a bed by themselves with a therapist on each side, and they have their experience, and then they integrate with the same therapist afterwards. Um, and they've had some really, really good results with that, right? But it's really expensive if you want to scale that up.
Yeah.
So Anthony Back, who's a physician in Seattle, devised really an ingenious study where it really mimics how these medicines, psychedelic medicines, have been given historically in cultural contexts and indigenous contexts. Village doesn't. Right? You do them as a group.
Right.
You're not. You're in ceremony in a ceremonial space, and there's a different kind of quality to that, right? Because it's not this individualized experience, and which to some people, individualized is what it's all about. But you know, something else seems to happen when we do it in a group setting, right? There's group healing. There's relational connections. There's chaos. There's spontaneity, and I think in the clinical trial world, we do want to control all the variables. But are we missing out in kind of bringing that assumption into the psychedelic therapy world, right? So I helped out with co-facilitating. Was one of many really small potatoes in this study, and I helped out with this group retreat for people with advanced cancer who were given higher doses of psilocybin than other studies, and all above ground, approved by the FDA. And the results were well. I will tell you one thing: the results were really good, but I can't tell you what the results are because what's has really stuck with me was how powerful it was to be a facilitator in the presence of group healing. Um, and I shared this with Dr. Beck that just being in the room, my sleep quality has improved. It's been almost a year since that session, and my sleep is just so much better, right? Like it's so much better. I didn't take anything, right? I was there as a psychologist, um, completely sober, and it had an effect on me, right? And I think it had an effect on everybody. And it's hard to describe that. Like, we you go to meditation retreats and things like that, you have experiences, and if you go to sacred places and go on pilgrimage and things like that, you can feel like an imprint of what other people have experienced in those places, in those retreat spaces, right? You can feel that they're different. And that's the best I can tell you is that that's what it felt like to be in the room full of people who were having intense experiences, you know, and while they had pretty significant medical issues going on too, simultaneously, many of whom have passed away since then. Uh,
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of my first experiences with this were these like very intense Zen retreats, right? They're notoriously intense. But one of the things I came out with was this idea of like the interconnectivity principle of this all, right? Especially the interconnectivity of people's minds or spirits or whatever word you want to use for that. And then it makes total sense what you're saying. I've wondered about that. You do it in a group setting, the way you're talking about for the study that you were a part of. Well, then all of a sudden it's all the minds of the different people sort of affecting each other in this somewhat more subtle way, which is a fascinating thing to realize. I think I realized doing those Zen retreats, oh, wow, our minds are all affecting one another. We are all interconnected in this way. And sometimes that would be one person kind of being in the state where they'd help other people who were struggling. You feel that sometimes in these group settings. I imagine you've probably felt things like that happening when you're doing that work and facilitating, and other times someone else has a breakthrough experience and we all feel the energy of that. I mean, that sounds amazing, actually. I can totally not
yeah,
that exact experience, but I could totally imagine, how that could work in the way that you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, there's something about it also is that in these group settings, ceremonial settings, um, you're hearing other people have experiences too, right?
Yeah.
And that brings up a whole different set of things. How do I relate to my distress? How do I relate to somebody having distress around me? Right? Like, am I going to get pulled away from the work I need to do
Yeah.
and start thinking about, oh, maybe somebody needs a glass of water? Do they need to go to the bathroom? Like, why isn't somebody helping that
Yeah.
person? Right? Oh, they are helping. Oh, that's so sweet. And you're out of your experience at
Yeah.
that point,
Yep.
right? And it really kind of, I think this is one of the many many values of group experiences, group retreats, group ceremony, whether it's meditation, dance, writing,
Right.
psychedelic assisted therapy, right? Like it really brings up how do we connect to others? How do we connect to other people's suffering? How does it affect how we connect to our own, right? Which is, these Dharma practices, they figured this out thousands of years ago, right?
There's a couple things to meet. One is there's a quote I heard from my shamanic teacher a long time ago. She said, "We get better individually, but we heal as a community." And it took
Yeah,
me a
spot
minute
on.
to like get that. And but I'm doing all the work with the various things over the years, leading and attending has been very profound. The other piece, adding on to what you were saying is that like, yes, you could get pulled away from your own practice based on the needs of other people, right? But the other part that I think is harder to experience unless you're kind of there is that other people can have experiences that help you. So, for an example, there has been many times where I've been in, a breath, because I do breath work ceremonies. Next one's coming up in
Oh,
March.
amazing.
I've
Amazing.
been doing these for a long time. This is the highest that you'll be, not that you get high, but this is the highest that one you could be without taking anything. It's a lot of breathing, it's a lot of mantra, there's dancing, there's all kinds of stuff. We drink a little chocolate, or as I call it, cacao. It's quite nice.
Mhm.
But sometimes somebody will be crying at
Yeah.
certain points, and you can almost feel the tension in the room that some people are like, oh God, I wish they would just shut up, to, oh man, I wish someone would help them, to then other people saying, thank you for doing that because I couldn't. And so that expression, that purgation, was not just for that person, but like we talked earlier about the collective, this like escape valve for some of those things to come through, and that allows people to have that emotion, even if they're not allowing themselves to have it. They get the benefit from it. And that's just one of many examples, but I think it's a poignant
Yeah.
one of like this kind of unspoken potentiality for communal work that only
Yeah.
happens, literally only happens when there's other people around. It will not happen on
Yeah.
your own.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I was alluding to earlier is like, can we see our difficult circumstances as a sacred mandala, right? These ceremonial spaces of healing are mandalas. And, we would like to think of them as like, there's jewel encrusted walls and, golden gilded palaces. But a lot of these mandalas have zombies in them, and they have cannibals and monsters and ghouls and
Yeah, worms.
creatures popping out of the clouds, and yeah, worms and all
Charnel
these
grounds, right? The
charnel
charnel
grounds.
grounds,
Exactly.
right, where
There's
the
rotting
bodies are going to
corpses and
be, right?
jackals.
Yeah,
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 that's also part of the sacred mandala, right? Like
yeah,
there's that person in there sobbing and screaming out the name of somebody you don't know.
Right.
This is also part of the sacred mandala, right? Like that's this is healing, right? Like here we go, here we go.
Yeah.
Let's do the work now.
when I first started doing this, I was in my 20s, and the other word that comes up to my mind is like compassion, or sometimes I talk about bodhicitta, this idea like I want to work on myself to help others. And you can be in those kinds of situations and you'll have this feeling like, oh, this other person's going through a hard time. You kind of feel it and you want to help them, and it's very spontaneous. So it could be distracting, I suppose, right? But in other
Yes.
moments, it's that natural compassion instinct that kicks in, and you realize, oh, I'm learning about compassion, in this
Yeah.
spontaneous way. Yeah, that
I think
mindset.
this is where so much of the work that I've been doing over the years converges with a lot of this work. Um, I've been getting into this author named John Wellwood, amazing, amazing psychologist. Um, I think he was a Zen Buddhist. He's passed away, but he has a line in one of his books, right? Like, love is more powerful than hatred because love can hold hatred, but hatred cannot hold love. And I've kind of played with that a bit since I read it. And, well, okay, is love more powerful than anxiety? Well, love can hold anxiety. Anxiety cannot hold love. Okay, love is more powerful than anxiety. Is love more powerful than fear? Well, let's see. Love can hold fear. Fear cannot hold love. And every time I go through the checklist, love is more powerful, right? And experiencing, hearing other people having a very hard time, I think these are invitations to open the heart, right? Like the mind kind of goes, oh, why are they being so loud? Or why hasn't somebody helped them? And then kind of just have to breathe into your heart and open your heart. And this is, I think, really fundamentally what it comes down to for the vast majority of people that I've worked with over the years who are dying is, can they open their heart towards the terror of not being here? And if not, what has happened in their life that's blocking that from happening? And can we work on that? And really, I'm going to, spoiler alert, the time to work on that is not when you're dying. Right?
Right.
The time to work on that is when you're healthy
Yeah.
and going about your ways and ruminating about the grudges you're holding and the grievances you have. That's the time to go, if I drop dead and this is my last thought, yeah, that might not be so cool. I might not want to go out on that note, right?
Yeah, it's
And
interesting, like in the stages of the path that we all learn when you're doing these studies, right? The famous Lamrim, right?
yeah,
Tibetan Buddhists, the first
yeah.
point they make is preciousness of human life, but certainty of death, right? You're not going to be around
Mhm.
forever. And there's different ways to think about what that means. Don't waste your life. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have to grow and develop yourself and help others do the same. But then, look at that honestly and, don't do what you're talking about, right? And oh man, I never thought about this. I never really tried to like address this set of questions, of my own mortality. I should have done that before. And it's true, right? It's so true.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I spent my whole life pushing away thoughts of death, and now here it is. Oh my God. I never realized it was going to happen to me. It's happened to everybody else. Thought I had more time. I thought it was going to be, later. And here I am. Oh shit. Like, oh,
I
Yeah.
like,
laugh and
oh
smile
no.
because that thought's real, isn't it? It's so
Yeah.
interesting. Everyone has it
Yeah.
like, oh, these other folks are going to die, and then you don't you don't take
Right.
it on
Me too.
yourself in some weird
Right.
way. It's very
Right.
strange. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
Sameet, what were some of the, your takeaways from the study and how you saw, given that we're, talking about people not being in a hospital, trying to, be at home and have this process be more accepted as opposed to less like, I don't want to deal, I don't want to see this thing, I don't want to be reminded of my own mortality, you know? And these people having the ability to, break free from some of their own maybe fears or anxieties or have their perspective changed. How did that, how was that?
Sameet, just real quick before
Yeah.
you answer, I don't mean to kill the flow, but I think a lot of people will be curious. I am too, with Daniel's question, so important, but also, is it possible, like maybe set the scene, like how many people were in the group, and could you maybe paint a little portrait of that if you can? Because it's sort
Yeah.
of
I
something
think
to
it
be
was,
interesting to visualize. Yeah.
I think it was about 6 or 7 people in a retreat center, and in a retreat center north of Seattle, and quite beautiful. I mean, it looked like a yoga studio, but it was in a retreat, kind of natural environment, lots of trees around, and away from town, so it's quiet. And it looked like a yoga studio, mattresses in a circle, and a central altar with meaningful objects for the participants in it, sound system, and that's pretty much it, right? Like not a clinical hospital setting, very comfortable and warm, and
That's like fascinating that the people who designed the study were like, they thought of all those issues. They really wanted to make like something more like what you're talking about, a sacred space. Yeah.
it was exceptionally well done, I thought.
Mhm.
And there's a distinction between comfort and safety, and I think anybody who's got a significant medical illness who signs up to take a very high dose of psilocybin or any other psychedelic is uncomfortable already, right, before they come into the study, or before they come into the experience. And I would say that that's what probably compels a lot of people to try psychedelics, or
Yeah.
to try psychedelic therapy or breath work, or any of these things that are sort of like outside the norm. I mean, I never got into it at all, but I really think that rave culture filled that for so many people and still does, right? This, like, I've had a really hard week and I'm going to get together with loud music and community and just lose track of time, right? Whether they're going to take something or not, right? Like, just that, to me, it sounds like it's enough. You don't need to take anything, but I'm sure I might not be the majority of that view, right? But I think when people come into like a psychedelic therapy study under these conditions, they're already pretty uncomfortable in their psyche, in their bodies, in their spirit. There's something that needs to be done, and there's a couple states that it's much more accessible than others, and so people are doing this every day now, right, in legally sanctioned, safe, structured environments. So they're already uncomfortable. They need to make sure that they're safe. That's the most important thing. And gut check, does this feel safe to me? Yes. Okay, proceed. gut check. Does this not feel safe to me? Don't do it. Right. Like the guy's kind of weird looking, or, like they're looking at me funny, or, I noticed there's a lot of traffic sounds here. Like that's okay. That's probably not the right setting for you. Right.
Right.
So I will say that the setting was completely safe. And I felt very safe there. And the participants also felt very safe. And that was part of the feedback they gave also.
Mhm.
So discomfort was part of the package, right? They're already coming into it with pretty advanced cancers and other medical issues, and they're getting a very uncomfortable dose of psilocybin also. And anybody who's done a multi-day meditation retreat knows that the beginning of the retreat is working with pain in the body, right? Because we're not used to sitting in that posture for hours and hours at a time. So you really have to get uncomfortable, right? But you have to be safe.
Yes, I guess Daniel, you're asking about like takeaways, right? I was just sort of trying to visualize it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like I'm just setting the scene. So yeah, I
No, you're
guess
good.
that would be like the takeaways part. Yeah.
But also slight plug for our meditation retreat,
Yeah.
Eric. April
Yes, that's
15th
true.
to April 19th in
Yeah.
Galena, Illinois. You know, Vajrayana, Tibetan tantric practices, and we'll be going over much of this here. I actually did one of these. They call it transition meditations or dying meditations. It's the generation stage practice for those of us who know, but for our audience, they don't know. And it takes you to different elements of the body and moves you to different states of non-conceptuality, you could call it. And so I put some needles in and I got him through this meditation. And he was like, he's like, man, you really got into that. And I was like, yeah, how about you? He's like, yeah, it was good. It was really good. And I was like, he's like, how often do you do that? I was like, every day. He's like, are you scared of dying? I said, no, but it's going to happen and I might as well practice. But that was his response. So to your point, Sami, I was waiting to kind of weave that in because that was the first thing that he said. So, yeah, but anyways, I'll let you speak and then get back to the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that my experience is that the best way to get people comfortable with the fact of their imminent death is not necessarily to confront the dying process itself, although that helps a lot. That really helps a lot. It's relational. Death is relational. Life is relational. And what I've experienced in this retreat and also in other settings, people think about their relationships. They think about their loved ones. They think about the ones who have passed before, their ancestors, their family members. They think about what their legacy is going to be. And the oftentimes the kind of big deal of psychedelics is, oh, you have a mystical experience, right? You're gonna have a mystical experience. You're gonna see the clear light. You're going to have like a Bardo kind of orientation. That happens sometimes, but I think people finding inner peace in their place in the world, that's kind of what peace at the end of life is all about, really. Whether there's clear light there, whether there's transcendence, whether there's, a parade of Buddhas coming and, anointing you with water. And
Mhm.
I think like, people feeling a sense of connection with their place in the world is much more profound. And it's also like it's happening right now, right? Like
Right.
if you want to do that, if you want to go there, right? Think about the impermanence of the body. And this is something that we as Tibetan Buddhists do several times a day, right? Dissolving and reemerging, dissolving and reemerging. Um, so I would say that what I witnessed in that particular setting was that almost pretty much everybody was well there I would say people were there for different intentions, different individual intentions, but I think relationships were really the running theme. What could be better, what is amazing. And really, I think when we talk about relationships, we are talking about love, the possibility of it, the potential of it, and that's the medicine, really.
And there's a thing in the, I think in this while the Chinese medical world talks about it a certain way, Tibetan Buddhism talks about it a certain way, and so on. But I've worked with sick people. I worked with HIV patients back in the day, with people who were ill, and I've gone through some of these kinds of things. And but even in the theory, there's this idea that, again, if we really use the Chinese word, the Shen, the spirit's going to separate from the body, and the same thing in like something like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's this process, but like, and I'm curious what you think about this, because if you haven't been around that, you might think it's just all grim and dire, but there's something powerful in that too. And when you watch people going through that process, a lot of times theory would go, as the spirit separates from the body, sometimes there's clarity for people, right? It's almost like you
Oh yeah.
separate away from the things that are the transitory issues of the world, of this life or something. The perspective gets a
Mhm.
lot broader. I had a friend who died on the same day as my cancer, same day as my father did, like
Oh,
very within hours. And well, we were having an interesting conversation before he passed. We had a party, and the party was just celebrating him. So it was all the people who knew him. He was dying of lung cancer. He was just a chain smoking guy, and at one point he was out on the porch and he was like having a smoke. So we all knew him.
right.
That's who he was. I walked out on the porch to talk with him, and he said, I can't explain this to you, but I feel like I'm full of love for everybody. And I feel like everything feels clear to me. And I wish I could share this with you and with everyone. And that's the other side of this, right? That part of it. And, again, in our
And he
theory
just shared
world,
it. He just shared
yeah,
it
he
now,
did.
all these years later. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very moving. And I had seen that with my father as well. So, part of the idea is you're tapping into some other part of your own psyche, your own spirit, your own nature. And I feel like that I'm curious about, because I shared the story. It seems like you feel like you've seen, obviously, I've seen patients with that. You've seen patients with that kind of experience too, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of the elemental dissolution that we talk about in Tibetan Buddhist practice, right? Like the earth element is not just the physical form, but it's the solidity of thought, collapses into the flow of thought that collapses into the intellectual fires, right? In traditional Chinese medicine, and that fire collapses into air and spaciousness. And what's left at the end of that, right? Like that's something that's happening with each cycle of breathing, but it's also, we can kind of deliberately go into it. I see it all the time. I mean, there's terms for um, I think it's called a terminal burst. Some people call it that. There's terminal restlessness. There's this period of lucidity that sometimes also happens, that people kind of wake up after a couple of days in a coma. They wake up with total clarity and appetite and all of this stuff, and it's like this miracle healing, right? But then they pass away 6 hours later, a day later, or 2 days later, um, and they're kind of like glowing when they come back from wherever they've been, right?
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen people starting to have this kind of radiant appearance as they get closer to dying. And it starts to look like the body is just trying to pump the soul out, or whatever word you want to use for the life force, right? The body is just pumping, and each breath is such an effort to get that pump to go and to release. And yeah, that's a very important time to make sure a person isn't disturbed. It's dim light, soothing environment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my mother's brother. So my mom is one of 10, and her brother passed away, and he was just like a month ago, a month and a half ago, and he was the first one of the 10 siblings to pass away. So it was very, very hard for all the brothers and sisters, you know. But he was diagnosed with stage 4 small cell carcinoma
Oh,
about last March. Didn't say anything. And then in the summertime, was having an ablation done, had a stroke, and they were like, "Hey, sir, do you know that your cancer is advanced?" He's like, "What cancer?" He was just like in total like denial of this. And so they said at that point that he probably have 10 to 12 months, 8 to 12 months, something like this. He ended up passing in December, and it was really difficult. I was first glad that I was able to spend time with him, and I was able to work on him, meditate with him specifically. And he was always blown away by the profundity of what happened. You know, these sort of like non conceptual states just really was. So I was very glad to be able to step in and do that for him. But to the point that you were talking about, the last like week of his life was he was just under so much pain. And finally, my mom, kind of, who she's a nurse and has worked on oncology wards before, was like, please give him enough medication that he is out of pain. And there was some admission from the hospital staff that the family wanted to keep him around a little bit longer. So they were intentionally keeping his pain meds down so he would be uncomfortable so he wouldn't leave his body.
Wow.
And so I was like, yeah, Eric, like your face, I was like, whoa, that's that's a deep thought, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That does happen. That does happen. And
Yes,
I think, again, it's just kind of like this, we don't know how to die, right? Like, it's going to happen whether we're ready or not, whether we know
right.
what to do or not. It's going to happen. I can assure everybody of that, right? But it's also like I said, sometimes it's very important, not just what you do, but what you don't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought I'd throw out, I'm so sorry. Actually, Daniel, we haven't talked about this off mic, but I'm the first sibling in the family. That's a thing.
Big.
Yeah.
That's
It
big.
really brings
Yeah.
something home, like
Yeah.
not everybody, right?
And they're old, you know,
Yeah.
they're baby boomers and you know, baby boomer Gen X area. So they're, you know, from 58 to 85. So they're all
Wow.
in that range, you know, where it's happening. But yeah, you know, it really anytime you have somebody pass in your family or friend or something like this, it at least for me, it's a reminder of the short time and how it's just over. It's just done. There's nothing else to do. There's no more plans to make. There's no more bills to pay. There's no more debts. It's finished. You're finished. Whatever
Yeah.
projects you had going, no more
Yeah.
projects. Your schedule is
Yeah.
instantaneously free.
Yeah.
And the last conversation you have with that person is the last conversation you'll really ever have with that person in that way. And sometimes you get lucky. I mean, it's hard for the person to know that they're terminal, as you know you've been working with for so long. But then I'm sure some of you get to tell the family like, "Hey, this person's going through this process," but you get to say to them now whatever is on your heart, and you know that it's going to go right to them. Right. There
Yeah.
is nothing else that matters. Any of the shit that you brought in here, none of it matters. The outside world, none of it. What matters is what's right here,
Yeah.
this love that's present. And you have the opportunity to say that. And I think you could certainly share from your experience, could be Sameet, but like I feel like we don't often do that enough. And so there's a kind of a regret where it's like we don't tell people often enough they matter, you
Yeah.
know? And so we
Yeah.
end up passing, or the people end up passing, and we're like gripping at ourselves for not sharing the things that we have wanted to share. And it just like eats us alive. How do you know, how do you counsel people to work with this on, you know, at the
Well,
end?
it's interesting. Several years ago, and really this is during the pandemic when there's just so much death
Yeah.
that, working in a hospital system is talk about collective grief and trauma. I had the insight then that, we never talked about love in my training. Never talked about love in graduate school. That's a word that's not said very often in the hospitals, right? Like, with any depth or profundity. Like, we can talk about medications, we can talk about symptom management, but we very rarely, aside from the palliative care community, talk about love. And that's something that I've started to really make it a point to do, is let's talk about the four-letter word. Let's talk about the L word. Let's make sure that that is on the checklist, right, of life. Because like you said, like at some point you go, oh, that thing that I did with this person, that was the last time I'm ever going to do that. And we didn't know that at the time, right? Like, at some point, everybody goes, shoot, that was the last good Thanksgiving. That was 2 years ago. Oh man, what I would do to have known, right? Well, do it now. Right? Like,
Yeah.
this could be the last good Tuesday. This could be the last good Friday. I don't know. We don't know. So, yeah, what have you been pushing aside saying, you know what, I'm just going to let that person, I'll tell them when I see them how much they mean to me. Well, we have these devices we're locked in on all the time now. Like, what, why not use them for some good, right? Like, why not reach out and say, hey, buddy, I was just thinking about you. It's been a while since we talked. Love you, right? We haven't talked in a while. Like, that's going to just feel good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know where this episode was going to go. We go in these things and you don't know where the conversation is going to take it, but it's very emotional for me in like a good way. As we're talking about, I was remember we're having this conversation, you naturally start thinking about people who have passed. And when I was a teenager, I ended up like kind of taking care of my grandpa in like his last days. It was just sort of a weird thing happened in the family. So I ended up sort of being in this caretaking role. And he passed and we were in the hospital and he had a stroke. But before his stroke, his last words were like he looked at me and he said, "I love you." And that was like the last thing he said. And I was like, "Love you too." And you
What a
look at
gift.
that retrospectively speaking, as we're talking now, it's jarring in the moment. You feel all that, but I'm like, I'm so grateful. Yeah, we had that moment. That was it. That was our moment. And it happened. And it does bring home that feeling of like we should do it all the time. We should do it all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And I mean,
I,
relationships are difficult. We don't always
yeah.
have loving relationships with the people we're supposed to have loving relationships with, right? But sometimes it's a pet, right? Like for so many people, a dog or a cat is the embodiment of love in their life. And the human realm didn't quite do it for them, right? And it's okay to do it that way. But I think, however healthily we can open our hearts, that's where everything comes together, right? All belief systems collapse, all methods collapse. When the heart is open, it almost doesn't matter what your belief is anymore. It's just so open, right? Like this John Welwood saying, love can hold hatred, but hatred cannot hold love. I think love can hold all categories. Not all categories can hold love.
It's interesting. Maybe there's a practice we can all take on. You mentioned the devices, and I have some routines I do where I like tell people that I love them, and I just send the text, "Hey." And it's
Yeah.
been interesting because I have a 13-year-old son, and he sort of adopted that habit. So most
Wow.
nights there's like a "I love you, Dad," in like a little something, and you sort of think, okay, that could be something we all could be doing. It's easy for us to do it now. We can take advantage of technology, the upside of it, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to,
Yeah.
we all can talk about the downsides, but the fact that we can do that. Yeah. I mean, that's a practice that we can all take on. Yeah. Yeah.
What greater expression of this precious human life and bodhicitta is there than to say I love you to somebody, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a very, very powerful mantra.
Yeah, that's true. It's very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Well, Sameet, I can't thank you enough for coming on again. I really appreciate it. We definitely are not going to go 5.5 years before we have you on again. That's
Yeah.
just too much time passing. I want to give you the floor for a minute here before we wrap up. Any lessons that you would like to share with whoever might hear this, or something that's calling to you right now, or a takeaway from your hosting at the retreat, or anything really.
Make sure that you're aware of your breath. That's really the fastest, the best way I know to open the heart is to still the mind with the awareness of the breath. This is the Buddha's teaching. I think this is timeless wisdom. If we can manage the stress response, and I think the most efficient way is with the awareness of the breath, then we might realize the heart is open anyway, right? Like the fact that it feels closed sometimes, it's not always, it's just stress. So
Yeah,
be aware of the breath and share love.
I
beautiful.
love your line about it's like it's the greatest mantra almost, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 yeah,
Great line. Thanks,
Yeah.
Samir.
that's good. Well, Sameet,
Sure.
thank you so much for coming on. Eric, as always, thank you for driving the ship. Audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want to have any questions or anything like that for Sameet, please feel free to leave us an email at ginandtantra@gmail.com, or leave a comment in the comment section, or hit us up on the gram at the Gin and Tantra podcast. Sameet, thank you again for coming on. Eric, as always, audience, thanks for tuning in. For Eric and Sameet, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.